Hello, Tyler Tolman here with Conscious Lifestyler, and today I'd like to talk about our flagship product called Pulse. What is Pulse? Well, it goes back thousands and thousands of years, and there's different stories from different cultures about making a food referred to as pulse from the Old Testament of the Bible. Now, one of the first stories goes all the way back to a man by the name of Pythagoras. Now, Pythagoras was known as the father of numbers, the first real mathematician. A lot of people don't really know a lot about Pythagoras other than he created the Pythagorean theorem that you learn in geometry in college. But Pythagoras did many things. He was actually the first one to put together the musical octaves. He actually heard some hammers pounding in a blacksmith, and he went in, he took some of the hammers and he hung them on strings, and he found out that there was very specific chords, and then he put them all together in something called the diatonic scale. So he was actually the creator of musical instruments based on the diatonic scale. He did many brilliant things. He created a whole society of philosophy. He was actually the person that coined the phrase philosophy, because at the time there were sages, and a sage was someone who knew everything. But Pythagoras knew that if you really knew a lot, you knew that you really didn't know anything, because information is endless. So he coined the phrase philosopher, meaning lover of knowledge and lover of wisdom. Really interesting stuff. So Pythagoras, what's really interesting is he traveled to Egypt, he traveled to places all over the world, and then at the age of 58 he moved back to his hometown of Crotona, Italy, and opened up something called the Pythagorean Academy, where people could come and learn from Pythagoras. Now, Pythagoras had a very rigorous basically trial before you could become a member of his society. And what he'd have you do is literally fast, on an extended fast on water for a specific number of days, and then when you did that and became a part of the school, he'd give you a very specific sacred meal that he called the Meal of Hercules. And it was a very specific mixture of nuts and seeds and grains and fruits into this whole meal that he would snack on and have the new members of his society eat for a period of 3 years. So you think about that, and if you wanted to be a student of Pythagoras, you had to fast for an extended period on water, and then you had to eat this food called the Meal of Hercules for a period of 3 years. Pretty interesting stuff. You'd probably have to be pretty interested in what he was doing to become a part of his society. But what that led to was a whole renaissance. People like Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and Da Vinci, all these people really came out and really came from a philosophy that Pythagoras set the stage for. Now, where did Pythagoras get this philosophy? I believe that he got it from Egypt. Where did he discover this food called the Meal of Hercules? I believe that he got it from Egypt. And it's really interesting. I've had some really cool confirmations just in the last few months, actually, about this thing called the Meal of Hercules. But if you skip forward just a little bit, or you actually look around the same time, 460 BC, there was also a guy by the name of Daniel from the Old Testament of the Bible. And if you just open up a Bible and read it, it talks about Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were extrapolated or brought out of basically their area where they lived and brought into King Nebuchadnezzar's realm. And it's basically a story about a king named King Nebuchadnezzar who wanted to gather together all of the fairest of flesh of young men, bring them into a situation and teach them mathematics and language and astronomy and astrology, and he wanted to basically teach them the art of warfare and how to be really strong to expand his kingdom. Now, Nebuchadnezzar decided to go 3 years of teaching these young individuals, and then he would pick who his advisors were, who his captains, his generals were in his army, and the people that would help him to expand his kingdom. Now, in this process, the king wanted to provide the best of the food, wanted to give them, the sweetmeats and the things that the king himself ate. But these 4 guys, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refused to eat the king's food and said, "Give us something called pulse to eat and water to drink." So they literally took away the king's food and gave these 4 guys pulse to eat and water to drink for 3 years. After the 3 years, the king and his advisors came in to test these 3,000 to 5,000 young men and found that none were smarter than Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And in fact, they were they were found to be 10 times more intelligent and stronger than everyone else. Really cool, interesting story where a group of people ate this food for 3 years, kind of like Pythagoras giving people this food for 3 years. Now, if you really look into the history of where Daniel was and where he was learning and the stuff he was going through, and Pythagoras, where he came from and what he did, it all goes back to ancient Egypt. And a couple of months ago, I was sitting on the couch watching television, and when I watch television, I watch the History Channel, I watch the Nature Channel, and Discovery. Like, that's it. That's pretty much what I watch. And on Discovery Channel, it had a program called Ancient Tombs Revealed. I was like, oh, Ancient Tombs Revealed. Like, they were actually breaking into new tombs in Egypt and looking for, the latest mummies, the latest information, what kind of new information are we going to find. And in this episode, these scientists and archaeologists went in and they found all these massive pots with all these seals, and they opened up the seals, and what they found inside these pots were date pits and seeds and grains, kamut and barley and different types of grains and seeds and nuts and stuff. And they were like, wow, I wonder what kind of food this was. And it was in all these different things. And then they had this tomb, and they were so excited, they thought, oh, this is going to be the next King Tut's tomb. And they opened it up, and they were all disappointed because there wasn't a mummy in there. Instead, there was hundreds and hundreds of these small bowls. And they were little offering bowls, and they all had a little inscription on it. And the inscription, when they gave it to the archaeologist, he looked at it and it says sacred meal and the number 26. And I jumped off the couch like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And they're like, oh, that doesn't mean anything. And they went off and they, finished their little Ancient Tombs Revealed. But what that did for me is it verified the fact that this meal called pulse came from Egypt. Because the number 26 was the number of ingredients that was used in pulse. My dad, his name is Tolman, traveled around the world for about 17 years studying different cultures, different civilizations, and actually living with them and discovering all kinds of different information. And he actually stumbled onto a scroll that was a direct writing from Daniel that had the exact description of pulse and the exact ratios of nuts and seeds and grains and how to make this food called pulse. So there was 26 ingredients, very specific ways to make it, and my father started doing exactly that. He found all the ingredients, he started putting it together and making it, and he called it pulse. He started feeding it to people, he started eating it himself. For an entire year, he lived on just pulse alone, and I was just a young child, around 11, 12 years old, and I started seeing what this pulse was doing for other people. They would come to him, he would make the food and give it to them, and they'd have all kinds of healing happen. So that's what brings me to today. I have this food called pulse, and it's basically made in the exact same ratios that it was made thousands of years ago by Daniel from the Old Testament of the Bible, from Pythagoras, who called it the Meal of Hercules, and I know that it comes from ancient Egypt. So just to give you an idea of what's in it, it has dates, raisins, oats, sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, prunes, figs, almonds, pecans, Brazil nuts, hazelnuts, walnuts, barley, kamut, millet, rye, quinoa, a bunch of different nuts and seeds and grains and dried fruits that were used in that age, basically. So it was believed that by looking into nature, we could see very specific ratios that exist in nature. Phi and pi, you see the way that things grow above the ground, right on the ground, and beneath the ground. They also saw a very specific correlation of mathematics in nature and mathematics in the body. And I believe it was through this observation that they actually discovered that you could take very specific foods from different parts in nature and put them together, enhancing the physical frame, the whole body, enhancing mental function. And so it's a really amazing food. I feel very privileged to have this food. I'm making it in Australia, and we're also having it made in the United States to get this out to people. And we put together some programs, one called a 30-day adventure, one called 14 days to a new you. And it's a program of cleansing your body's digestive system. The Egyptians referred to this as a river of life or a river of death, depending on what you float down that river. And I think it's pretty obvious that when we look into the statistics of everything going on in the world, which people are floating things down the river that aren't so good. So this cleanse is all about getting rid of that river of death and cleaning out all that putrid, stinky, parasitical, nasty stuff, giving yourself a break and cleansing a little bit, and then experimenting with some food that was eaten thousands of years ago that really was believed would enhance the entire human frame and would really open up doorways within the mind to other realms and other things, possibilities that people don't really talk about too much. So that's what pulse is. That's where it comes from. That's just a little snippet about pulse. I've been snacking on pulse off and on for many years, and I know when I'm eating this food, I feel fantastic. Mentally, I'm totally clear. At least once or twice a year, I do a 30-day adventure, at which I'm starting pretty much right now. I just started a colon cleanse, and I'm getting onto this. So if it sounds like something that you're interested, you want to have more energy, more mental capacity, you want to lose some weight, if you're overweight, I know people that are underweight that eat this food and actually gain weight. It's really the perfect whole food. During this 30-day process, I recommend also having fresh fruits and vegetables. Go raw for about 30 days and see what happens. It's a pretty awesome experience. So anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching this video and have a great day.